right, should we the words? I'm going to have struggle with words today. Sorry. It looks like, sorry, I was looking at the agenda in the, so there was a public comment schedule and we have, right, 3 people who look like they're signed up for the JROTC comments.
Yes, there are 4 people here signed up, but I don't see any of them right now. I know someone was here
Okay.
really early, so I don't know if they.
I saw somebody pulling up just as I did, so they might be waiting downstairs. That I know is JROTC.
Okay, well, I guess we'll wait on that. Should we just move on to, oh yeah, introductions, and then we'll start with the diplomas policy. Just start over at.
Sure. Terry Proctor, Communications Department.
Cheryl Proctor, Deputy Superintendent.
Renard Adams, Chief of Research Assessment and Accountability.
Amy Rona, Student Success and Health.
Eddie Wong, board member, chair of this committee.
Patty Sullivan, board member.
Anyway, Assistant Director of Health and PE.
And Mary Crowe, I coordinate drug and alcohol supports for students.
Jay Buno, Chief of Student Support Services.
Kara Bradshaw, Executive Assistant.
Margaret Calvert, Assistant Superintendent.
Will Flores, I'm Director of MLA Programs, Multilingual Programs. DCC Director of School Academics.
I'm sorry. I mean, your name again.
Will Flores, FLORES.
And your job.
Director of Multilingual Learners.
Oh,
Services.
multilingual. Thank you.
Yeah, should we start with let's start with the diploma policy, if it's okay with everyone. See the public comment, like some you are here, we'll have you go third right after the drug education curriculum. That way, for the brunt of it, if you don't want to stay, you can go. Yeah. All right, diploma policy. I feel like I don't know who's presenting this one.
Well, there wasn't a presentation. You wanted to continue the conversation about graduation. And so I didn't know if you had a set of questions that you would like
Okay.
response to, or
Yeah, I think it was.
I thought we were doing the other items. I thought we were going to circle back to
Yeah, I
this
think.
one, but it somehow made it on.
Yeah, I think just some background. I think what the reason this came up on the agenda was because in the policy committee there was changes to the diploma, the graduation requirement. And I think there were some questions about that. Although I think, from my understanding, most of that stuff was just keeping up with what the state requirements were and updating that according to that, right? So it wasn't any substantial changes. And I think the reason for the update was just to kind of present that really briefly, so that we kind of have it on record. But if
Yes, Philippe, would you? Philippe, you could come this way. I think there's public comment that's going to be on that side. I think it may be in board book. Is it a policy draft? Philippe, we're just talking about policy change and just the elements where there's a difference.
That's right.
You
So
could probably brief it.
the only change is last spring, the state decided that the new graduation requirements should include half a credit of personal finance and half a credit of higher education and career preparation. So that change has been added to the adjusted policy document. I can just share that Oregon Department of Education is in the process of articulating what the standards should be for those 2 graduation requirements,
Okay.
and what requirements they will have as far as how to implement those standards. One option would be that school districts are required to implement a new class. Another option would be that school districts are required to provide activities that relate to those standards. So OD is in the process of finalizing those rules, and we can expect that those decisions will be made by the end of the school year. And then we will do some thinking around how to best implement those changes here in PPS. The new requirements impact the class of 2027. That's our current ninth graders. So we have a little bit of time, but we're monitoring these changes closely. I'm serving on one of the panels. One of my colleagues is serving on the other panel. So we're monitoring pretty closely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions?
No, that sounded very clear. I was
Yeah.
wondering if it had to be implemented, so that's
Yeah.
good to know.
In the works.
Yeah, if there's no more questions, let's move on to our third item, the drug education curriculum. And
Can
Director
I,
Sullivan, if
yeah.
you want to,
I wanted
Take
to talk about this because I got an email from a parent who was quite concerned that the drug and alcohol, I guess, maybe they don't even say and alcohol anymore, but the drug policy and education left something to be desired. And she had just read the Lund report, which I'm sure you've read too. And anybody can find it, put in Lund report, there's all sorts of information. But if you don't mind, I'm just going to read what she wrote. This is what concerned me. My two children attend Lincoln High School. I grew up in a family that was deeply harmed by substance abuse. Both of my brothers were long-term methamphetamine addicts and have maintained a constant and open dialogue with my children about substance abuse, including policy and treatment approaches. My surviving brother has been in recovery for a decade and works at an inpatient substance abuse treatment center. He has dedicated his life to this issue and helps guide our family discussion. Over the last several years, my children reported classroom presentations at Lincoln regarding drug use that left me deeply troubled. My children state that they would not feel comfortable publicly taking the position that diversion programs, drug court, might be effective in addressing substance addiction when paired with adequate treatment resources and other social service supports. They have reported that they feel the substance abuse prevention curriculum at Lincoln is primarily designed to encourage their support of Measure 110 and to destigmatize the use of illegal drugs. They report that they are taught that just like alcohol, many people can use these substances, meth, heroin, etc., without developing an addiction. Honestly, I believe my children were exaggerating until I listened to a recent OPB Think Out Loud episode and looked at the referenced Lund Report article. And the article is excerpted below, which I won't read because you can definitely read it yourself. This leaves no doubt that the Lincoln curriculum is designed to increase my children's level of drug policy advocacy and tolerance of illegal drug use. That is unacceptable. PPS children should have access to an evidence-based curriculum that seeks to prevent the use of illegal drugs. This will be a life and death question for many children. Please adopt an evidence-based drug use prevention program for PPS that does not focus on drug policy advocacy. And one thing I noticed in reading the Lund report, it does mention how important that social emotional learning is, and we are trying to do that. It also mentions how difficult that is to actually make it work everywhere. And also how important cooperative learning is. And also, and we are doing this too, the focusing on freshmen and making them feel comfortable as they come into high school. So I know we are working on it, but I wanted to find out really what the program is and to help this parent have a peace of mind.
Yeah, so thank you. And so to do that, invited Jenny and Mary to go through what we do provide. And thank you for sharing the person's perspective. We prepared a few slides. Jenny will talk about what we provide in our health classes, and it is based in evidence-based practice. And then Mary will talk a little bit about what we do and respond to students who use it out of my office. So with that, I'll hand off to you.
And I, rather than cover all of health education, I did focus just on substance use and abuse prevention.
Well, that's definitely what
Okay.
this person wanted to know.
Yeah. So our scope and sequence is K-12 standards line scope and sequence, the focus of which is grounded in medical accuracy, cultural inclusivity, and developmental appropriateness as designed by the state. It outlines the core and key topics and concepts of the scope, as well as the logical progression, the sequence of essential health knowledge, skills, and behaviors to be addressed in grades K through 12. The primary skills to be developed are those in the state and national health education standards, which are critical to our students' ability to become successful learners who adopt and maintain healthy behaviors now and in the future. An important piece to know about our health education standards in Oregon, and they have just been updated and will be implemented in the 24-25 school year. So the ones we are using are the ones that were updated at the end of 2016. But the standard number 1 is content. So that's all the things you might consider like Googleable knowledge, you know. And then standards 2 through 8 are all skills. So things like decision making, goal setting, advocacy, communication, pieces like that. So the bulk of our lessons are supposed to be grounded in skills and developing the skills that students need to make healthy choices. And engage in healthy behaviors. So for the scope and sequence, so for elementary substance use and abuse prevention, there's a primary focus on identifying trusted adults, safety rules, particularly around medications, analyzing influences, and for younger students, we start small in the immediate, and then we work our way out as they get older. So we start small with families, communities, peers, and then we move out to the larger society, right, as they age. Self-management, so how to make the decisions, the healthy decisions that we want to engage in, and then in those decisions. Refusal skills, particularly around, if, for example, in this case with substance use and abuse, would be if someone offers you substances, how to refuse substances and their impact on the brain, and then protecting ourselves. When we move into secondary education with grades 6 through 12, we're focusing more on the consequences of substance use and abuse. So not just the physical consequences, but the social emotional consequences that can also occur, healthy alternatives to using substances. So a primary focus of our work is always on primary prevention. So what is it that's causing someone to use a substance in the first place, right? So if someone is experiencing challenges to their mental health, they might use a substance to cope. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at what are the primary factors that are leading to the use, and how can we kind of head that off before it begins. Internal and external pressures, various resistance techniques, analyzing influences again, but taking that into a much broader stance with the community, culture, and media, and then accessing valid and reliable information and services. So a big piece that we're really working on with students, and this is focused on throughout K-12, but particularly for our secondary students who are more able to go out into the community and access services on their own, is how do you find services that have reliable and truthful information. As we all know, we can Google and get all kinds of things. And so we want to make sure that what we're getting is reputable. And so those are really kind of the broad, categories of things that we're covering with our substance use and abuse prevention curriculum. The link, the hyperlink on scope and sequence is our overview that we provide to parents in terms of what it is that we're covering. In that realm, and kind of digs in a little bit deeper into what topics are available. The one piece that I would add about the Lund report, which we did read, and about evidence-based curriculum. One of the most difficult things about evidence-based curriculum in the health education field is that by the time you notice a trend, and then you write a curriculum, and then you test that curriculum, and then you replicate those studies, and then you publish it, and then you get, and then you get it adopted, and then it gets into a school system. a lot of what we find is that it is very outdated for our students because the health behaviors that they're engaging in and the different things they're facing are changing so rapidly. So for example, we often find it difficult to find health curriculum that starts including vaping or fentanyl, right? And that's what's come up just at the state level. And that's because we still have quite a bit that's focused on cigarette smoking, yet when we look at the data, a very, very small portion of our students engage in cigarette smoking. And so when someone says or puts out a statement that, you know, most of Oregon is not using evidence-based substance use and abuse prevention, sounds like this terrible thing. And it's not that we shouldn't be using evidence-based practices, just as Jay mentioned, but it's very difficult to stay on top of and ahead of what our students are experiencing if we're always only looking to these evidence-based programs. So we do stay focused on evidence-based practices, theory-based. We stay connected to our state and local partners who work specifically in these substance use and abuse fields. So Oregon Health Authority, Multnomah County Health Department, ODE, as well as SAMHSA and other national organizations so that we know what our students are experiencing and what are the things we really need to focus in on. And in addition to that, we do rely heavily on our youth risk behavior data as well as our successful schools data and other data that's gathered here within our district to make sure that what we're delivering is really specifically tailored to the things our students are facing. So we really do put a lot of effort on every other year really looking at that data and making sure that we're being responsive.
Yeah, I think one of the things that this person was worried about, and actually I saw it too in the lab report, that the curriculum was put out by the, the Drug Policy Alliance. That's the one that funded Measure 110, which, you know, was obviously looking at trying to help people once they have problems, but also decriminalize them. And some other things I read said when people looked into the program, it looked good, but you still wonder when it's a group that's working on the decriminalization more than the kind of staying away from it.
Sure.
So that was a problem.
Well, one thing I can say to that is that Stanford University Medical Center has taken over that curriculum and done a complete revision, and that is the curriculum that we are currently using. And I guess I would also say that we never take something and then just go, okay, this looks good and put it out there. We do a full analysis and standards alignment to make sure that it is aligned with our laws, mandates, and state standards. So while I do understand their reticence with who created that program initially, I feel that the standards alignment that we did along with Stanford having done a full review and revision have put us in a really good spot to be using something that they can feel really good about.
Yeah, I did notice in the report they talked about how they were looking at that and testing it more. So I didn't see about the Stanford bit yet in the lab report. Thank
you. I think one thing that PPS can be really proud of is that we offer a continuum of supports to our students in regards to substance use. And so that starts with health education in elementary school, including talking about substances, and it continues until students are 12th graders. And we have an MTSS model for how we deliver substance use supports. And for this slide, I highlighted some of the stuff that Student Success and Health does around prevention education. And so we, tomorrow night, for example, we're showing Screenagers for free at Grant. You're welcome to come if you want to come see Screenagers. And we partner often with Multnomah County and other community-based organizations to offer these types of events for students and families. The other thing that we can be really proud of that I was just on a phone call about when I was driving over here is Insight. The Westland Wilsonville School District was calling me to ask me about Insight, which is a long-standing psychoeducational program that we offer. So students that have the lowest level drug or alcohol violation, our first intervention in response to them is education. And they get 6 hours of psychoed over 4 Wednesdays. And they attend with a parent or a caring adult in their life. And that's been in existence in PBS for more than 15 years.
922 years. That curriculum continues to be updated as well.
It does. We're always looking at ways to improve it and refine it and incorporate evidence-based practice. What we continue to learn about adolescent brain development, which is changing constantly and is very exciting. And then the thing that we do when students need a higher level of care is we have drug and alcohol counselors in all of our high schools that offer, to be clear, they offer the lowest level of drug and alcohol counseling. And so when we have students that need a higher level of care, then those counselors are working with students and families to navigate that in our community. So we can be really proud of this model because this model does not exist in most districts nationally. The other thing that PBS did a ton of work on, and Jenny helped work on it, Mary Kane helped work on it, and Amy Rona helped work on it, is we redid our drug and alcohol policy, and it was adopted in September of 2021. And we really moved to having interventions and supports be the primary way that we respond to drug and alcohol discipline violations. And we've really reduced the number of the use of out of school discipline. And so for a comparison, in the 18-19 school year, before we had this policy, we had 9 expulsions, like kids were completely expelled for drug and alcohol violations. Last year we had 1, the year before that we had 1. That's important work, and that's an important shift that we made in that policy to really focus on interventions and supports.
Yeah, and the advantage of that too is if you expel them, you no longer can help them.
Exactly, yeah. And if students are spending big periods of time suspended at home and they have a substance use problem, it's more time to play the Xbox and smoke weed, unsupervised
And
generally.
not be in the activities they were enjoying. I noticed they talked about sports and performances.
Yeah, that's another thing we did when we updated the policy. We reduced the amount of time that students can have their access to sports or whatever. It used to be 28 days, which is the life of, it's a season, it's the whole practice run up to a play. And so we reduced it to 14 days, and you can also continue to go to practices. We just eliminated games and performances. Yeah, suspension. And then this is just an overview of the tiered supports, the way we think about discipline and what happens at the first time a student has a discipline violation, the second, the third, the fourth. We have very few students that get to the third and fourth level of discipline. Most students, the vast majority of our students have 1 discipline violation. The vast majority have 0. Then after that, it's 1, and then an even smaller group that makes it to 2, 3, and 4 discipline violations. And then this is just how we do this through the Office of Student Supports. There's 3 Portland Public Schools CADCs who are PBS employees, and then we work with a host of contracted providers that are providing treatment and services to students in our buildings.
Great, thank you.
No questions.
Good.
It's answering questions. It's good.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. This is very, very informative because I didn't know a lot of this stuff, so this is good to see again. Thank you. Yeah, if there's no more, we can move on to, I think I want to have public comments
Although
first.
Jay has, were you
Oh.
gonna share something, Jay?
Not if you didn't have any additional questions.
But you're sitting there looking like you have
Yeah,
to-
got
I was just ready to answer any questions you had, but you said you're good.
I guess I did have one for you. So are there special classes or special schools? Don't we have one special?
We partner with 2 schools that are they're called recovery high schools that
Okay.
students can access. They're not our schools, but one's through the MESD and another one's through, I don't know, what's the district?
Lake
It's a charter
Oswego,
school.
it's a charter, but PBS students can attend it.
And so they would be recommended to go there if,
They can choose to, and we can then access slots for them there.
okay, good.
Students have to actively choose into recovery high schools. It's never a placement.
They would just know it's there if they need it.
Mm-hmm. And if they want to be in a recovery environment.
Depends on the person, I'm sure.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Let's move on to public comment. I just want to have this done first so that we can spend the rest of the meeting focusing on the DLI discussion. Okay, we had 3, I think. That's what I saw.
4 people signed up.
Okay.
Let's start with Daniel Shea.
And just a quick reminder, it's 2-minute, they're going to have a warning and we'll make a hard stop at 3 minutes just because we have a full agenda today. We're already a little behind, so thank you for letting me interrupt you if it gets to that point.
Well, first of all, just like you, my name is Daniel Shea. I'm the president of the local chapter of Veterans for Peace. I wear a number of hats, so I'm also with Jewish Voice for Peace and with War Resisters League. Now, I heard that, there was a proposal being put forward about having JRRTC programs in the Portland Public Schools. Well, as a Vietnam veteran who has suffered from that legacy of that war and every war thereafter, the problem of reaching out to high school students appalls me. It upsets me. I don't like it when people say thank you for your service, because I don't feel I served anybody. I was deployed to Vietnam to kill people. I was a machine gunner. I also was exposed to toxic chemicals, which I suffer from now. I go 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for therapy for my skin cancer that's related to Agent Orange. Also, I had a child that was born with a congenital heart disease, cleft palate, and other things as an Agent Orange victim. And through that, when 1981, when he had to go for heart surgery at 3 years of age, there was a oxygen shock to the brain, and he went into a coma for 7 weeks. And the last days, I held him in my arms. He took his last breath and died in my arms. So for me, as an individual who suffers because of war, I have to question, why do we go to war? And to think about why these things happen. Why did I join? Who am I? What did this? And why me? Well, it wasn't just me. It was millions of Vietnamese people and their children that are born with it. I've become part of an organization called Vietnam Agent Orange Relief and Responsibility Campaign. And I've gone back to Vietnam twice, and I'm involved with delegations coming to the United States and going before a Congress. Those kinds of things upset me. But the main problem is that don't kid yourself that this is about discipline and keeping kids in school. It's a recruiting effort. Even though the Pentagon will say it's not, they're spending anywhere from $80,000 per student to recruit them into the military. And recruitment is going down, so they're looking at all kinds of means to do that. I was in Chicago when most of those schools had JROTC programs in those schools and was mainly funding those schools at a certain level. Those students were, majority of them were students of color. Now, my daughter went to Reynolds High School where they have the program. In that school, I go in and speak to the classrooms at times and talk about my personal experience. What I see is a lot of immigrants, people who understand what war is about because they've fled those countries. Can you imagine having more and more kids out there wearing uniforms, acting like military, and how that psychological problem affects them when they're in that classroom? They're not going to say anything because they're happy to be here. So I think we need to really understand, why would you be putting this forward? We just had a veteran, Aaron Bushnell, who in Omalite set himself on fire to protest what's going on in Gaza. How can we be talking about this when we're looking at genocide going on and more violence in our schools, gun shootings all over, when the military is teaching people to kill and to carry guns? We need to get guns out of our society and start thinking about peace. Thank you. That's basically my comment.
Thank you for sharing.
Herschel Scholes.
Yeah, Herschel Souls here. I'm with the War Resistors League, and I'm opposed to JROTC. I experienced the real thing. I took ROTC in college. So when they talk about leadership, teaching leadership and how to be a good student, it's very laughable. They're teaching in the military, you're to learn fellowship. Just follow the orders and follow the chain of command. So the orders come down to you. I mean, you get to maybe lead a platoon or something like that. They call it lead. But it's not up to you to decide anything. I was thinking about My Lai, the massacre over there. And these guys over there were killing people and almost following the orders to do this, shooting people. Didn't even matter how old they were. It was kind of a massacre. Now, these soldiers were not trained by some Nazi shipped over here to do training or somebody from outer space. They were trained by American drill instructors, and they were trying to do the best they could to follow orders. I heard a story where there was a 4-year-old boy frightened, tried to run away, 4 or 6, maybe probably more 6, and they caught up with him and then kind of did him away. We don't really want to be teaching these kids, like 13 and 14, how to kill people and be efficient at it. It appalls me. Let's see what else I have here. I know there were about 58,000 people that were killed soldiers killed over there in Vietnam. Now, does anybody feel safer with that contribution, that kind of price? 58,000, and you feel better now? I mean, even the reason we were over there was kind of a joke. They kept coming up with this thing about the domino theory. And then at the end, it wasn't the domino theory, it was our credibility. We have to be able to threaten people. They have to realize that we really will do something. I mean, that was a lot of lives to do nothing. Martin Luther King said something about our foreign policy. And he said, we have a morbid fear, meaning the people who run the country, big corporations, a morbid fear of communism. And that explains quite a bit if we have a morbid fear. It explains why we have sanctions against Cuba. Cuba doesn't send bombers, tanks, ammunition to these foreign countries. They send doctors. They had 10,000 doctors in Brazil. They were kind of told to leave because there was another right-wing person there decided that they didn't want to give any money to Cuba. That was their reason for getting rid of doctors. Doctors who were out there taking care of people who never get to see doctors. It is a recruiting policy, and it's a consistent policy. Formerly, they used to kind of send the poor, blacks especially, turn down your page, riff off the corner. Those are the guys that were going to the front line. This thing about JROTC is simply an extension of that program to prey on the blacks and the poor. It's a steep price to pay for high school education, all right? And it's a poor penalty for choosing the wrong set of parents. I think it's just a bad idea to get JROTC in the schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John Gresco?
I'm John Gresho, and I'm coordinator for the local chapter of the War Resisters League. JROTC claims to be able to transform struggling students into succeeding adults. In one promotional ad, JROTC claims to be the best leadership training program in the world. Yet while the United States and its military are increasingly diverse, its leadership, its officer corps, is not. How are those black and brown and poor students who are attracted to JROTC or directed to it by well-meaning counselors and advisors, how can those struggling students be expected to buy into learning leadership skills when leadership positions within the military are largely closed off to them? JROTC also claims to teach self-discipline and personal responsibility. Yet, in JROTC, as in the military, it's really all about learning to follow orders. JROTC instructors are notorious for yelling at and berating students who do not meet expectations. They are former military officers, and that is their modus operandi. But it is not good teaching, and it does not encourage the development of self-discipline. Self-discipline and personal responsibility cannot be imposed by a top-down system. These traits must be nurtured and encouraged. The military is focused on immediate results, not gradual personal growth. The third claim is that JROTC teaches critical thinking skills. I think they threw in this claim into the mix just because it's trendy, frankly. The last thing the military wants is for their personnel to think for themselves, especially in a combat situation. Following orders and thinking critically are polar opposites. That's what basic training is about, to discourage any critical thinking. And that's what the JROTC curriculum is about as well. It's called indoctrination. The JROTC program makes a lot of lofty claims about what it will do for struggling students. The truth is, it is not the right program for them. JROTC is not really about these students, or about education, or about service to the community. It is really just another means of enticing young folks into the military. In the 1960s and 70s, there was a military draft in this country, and there was considerable resistance and protest, and the military does not want to go there again. So the only real alternative is recruiting in the public schools. That is what JROTC is really all about.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Michael Sonnleitner?
Sonnleitner. I'm a career educator. I've taught students at various four-year colleges and universities, as well as Portland Community College, for 4 decades. Most recently at Portland Community College, where I taught for 27 years full-time, political science, I also served on the PCC board as an elected trustee, representing 140,000 people in Southeast Portland. That was an 8-year stint, and ended last July when I replaced myself. All of us are replaceable. ROTC. I have to say that I agree with what has been already shared. I don't want to repeat it. I agree with the letter that was sent to you from the PATH union, and I think you need to take that very seriously, including the issue of getting input from the community. I don't represent the community. We need to have surveys, perhaps public opinion polls relating to what the response would be for this significant cultural change. I would like to suggest that you may have a hero in common with me, Martin Luther King Jr. I'm unusual in that half of my doctoral dissertation was on Martin Luther King. I've read everything that he's ever written. I've read the entire archives at the King Center in Atlanta. I've read all of his papers from Boston University. I've interviewed teachers of his at Crozer Seminary. Benjamin Mays, the president of Morehouse College, was among the people I interviewed. Ralph Abernathy, James Lawson. Bottom line is, if you look at Dr. King, can you imagine what he would be saying about JROTC? The year before he was killed, he became radical. In his speech at the Riverside Church in New York City, he was concerned very assertively against what he saw the triple evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism. Militarism is not just being anti-military, it's a ideology of hierarchy, of command and control, and people are trained to kill. As a trustee at PCC, I was all about student success. I could talk to you a lot about those experiments, and many of them work. We never even considered having anything like ROTC at PCC. It is culturally incompatible with an open educational atmosphere. It is indirectly a recruiting device. Let us be really honest about that. Dr. King and his legacy require us to be so. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
It's always important to hear our community's voices. Yeah, I would like to now transition to the student, our DLI conversation. I don't know if you come in. Hi.
If you guys could come to the table. You want to come on, because I think we're going to have a lot of guests over here.
Anywhere, I think, wherever there's space.
So where would you like us to sit?
Anywhere.
Anywhere, okay.
Wherever there's space, yeah.
Can I sit next to you? James.
Hey.
Kojo.
Yeah. Hey. Can we sit here? Yeah.
One more seat down here.
There's a seat here too.
Andrew.
Andrew, you want to sit here?
Good to see you again. Good to see you. Thanks, Mara, for joining us.
I don't need it.
I'm tired, but So they can.
Oh, so, all right.
Put a document that's on the screen.
Yeah, so.
Oh, you're
Yeah,
actually
talk to
taking.
Kara over there in the corner. So, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. This is going to be a little bit different just because, I think we usually don't tackle things like this, but this is good. One of the things I do want to, before we start, we're going to do introductions in a sec. But one of the goals for this discussion is a focus on problem solving. One thing I don't want to do is, going into the blame game, like, oh, this is what happened, and things like that. That I don't think that's helpful for going forward. Our goal for having the discussion in the Student Success Committee is to figure out how to create long-term stability, how to make sure that the needs from both, staff, the DLI program, et cetera, are met. And my ultimate wish is to be creative in our problem solving, trying to figure out what we can do, thinking out, maybe it requires thinking outside the box, being creative. We have a lot of great minds in here. I'm hoping we can figure something out that works for everyone, right? And with that said, let's start off with introductions. Maybe we can start in this corner again.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Will Flores, and I'm the Director of Multilingual Programs.
Margaret Calvert, Assistant Superintendent.
Cheryl Proctor, Deputy Superintendent.
Matt Bacon-Brennis.
JV, Chief of Student Support Services. I'm sorry.
Matt Bacon-Brennis. I'm the 8th grade Japanese dual language immersion language arts teacher at Mount Tabor.
Lian Tran, 7th and 8th grade Vietnamese dual language immersion at Roseway Heights Middle School.
I'm James Liu. I'm a parent of 2 students in the Vietnamese dual language immersion program, 1st grade and 9th grade. I'm also the assistant girls tennis coach at McDaniel High School.
Eddie Wong, board member, chair.
Patty Sullivan, board member.
Kojo Hakam, member in immersion at Harrison Park Middle School, 6, 7, and 8.
Hi, Andrew Pan, Mandarin immersion 7 and 8 at Harriet Tubman Middle School.
Kelly George, I'm the chair of Shu-Ren for Woodstock, Harrison Park, and Cleveland, and also a parent of 3 children in the immersion program, currently 1 at each school.
Yuki Sakai, Japanese dual language, 8th grade social studies at Mount Tabor, and former student at Mount Tabor.
Maya Mori, I am a JDLI parent of 4 kids, 6th grade, 8th grade, and 2 graduated kids. And I'm the co-president for Oyanokai, which supports the Japanese immersion program.
Kara Bradshaw, Executive Assistant.
JJ, I see you on.
JJ Kunsevi, McDaniel District Student Council Representative.
We have in the back as well.
Powell, Board Manager.
Phil Casey, Senior Director for High School Academics.
Thank you. And then our online people. Maybe, I don't know, JJ, if you're still with us, if you want to kick it off.
JJ Kunsevi, McDaniel District Student Council Representative.
And kicking it off to Tanya Arnold.
Hi, this is Tanya Longo. I'm the principal at Mount Tabor Middle School. So sorry that I couldn't be there with you in person tonight.
And then, sorry, I'm having a hard time reading that last one.
It's Fu Dao.
Good evening, Fu Dao, principal at Roseway Heights Middle School.
Great.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we are here. We have some staff that wanted to also be a part of the discussion to provide insight. And as we also hear the discussion, what direction do you want to go, Director?
Yeah, so the vision I have, and again, this is all subject to change depending on how we want it to go or how things are going. The way I had it envisioned is that we would have staff and then people representing the DLI programs, present kind of what their needs are in terms of having, what it looks like to have a successful program. And then after that, both sides would also present the challenges, specific challenges we have. And I think this is going to get a little complicated because I know that the different DLI programs have different specific challenges, as well as with the staff in terms of like, for example, the policy and the administrative directive in dealing with trips.
But we have a short presentation just to kind of open up the conversation.
I think I saw that loaded up on Board Books just recently. Yeah, if that's okay with everyone, I think we should just start with that.
To share the presentation.
Yes, just a second.
Great, sounds good.
And I'll turn it over afterwards to Margaret Calvert, who will open us up with that presentation.
While we're waiting for it to load. I invited Will Flores to join us and to give a little bit of context of sort of DLI. Some of you are deeply immersed in it and some it's newer to us, so and to the folks in the room. So wanted to give a context of what it means in the middle grades in particular across the district, not only, just across the district. So I think that Hera's going to get this rolling here, and I'm going to turn it over to Will here to start, and then we'll kind of just go. It's a brief overview of sort of the structures and the tenets and the goals as we go roll through, and then also what we see not only for the folks that are here with us in the room, but also the other DLI programs that we offer at the middle grades.
And it's brief. It's only 8 slides, so we just want
Very
to
short.
say it.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'll try to be brief. I know we have a group of DLI fans and experts in the room. So our programs, we're very proud of our DLI programs. PPS, as you may know, has the most DLI programs in the state, and we're very, very proud of the diversity of languages that we offer. So I want to give you sort of a quick overview of the national level, if you will, but bringing it locally. The national guidelines for dual language is what we're based on. And 3 of the pillars of dual language is, we want to make sure that we are meeting and that we're following the bilingualism and biliteracy needs of our students. And we try to center our multilingual learners in line with our board policies and goals that the board has set. We aim to close the achievement gap of our multilingual learners, but there's also that added benefit of having native speakers of the other language, depending on the programs that we are offering at the various sites. And then finally, we want to make sure there is a high level of cross-cultural competency from our graduates. And then there's an added one that we are, maybe it's not added, but it cuts across, and it's a critical consciousness that we want our students to be as a result of graduating from one of our programs. And if we can go to the next one, this is a list, and I don't know that everyone can see it, but and the next slide will show us this is where schools begin and where they feed into the middle school that they feed into, as well as high schools as applicable, depending on the language of instruction. PPS has 2 models that we offer, and we have offered these models for quite a few years, as you all well know. The Chinese, Japanese, and Vietnamese DLI programs are based on what we call a 50-50 model, which means that 50% of the school day is in the partner language, or that's where it begins, and 50% of, the other 50% is English. And so as you go through that program throughout your schooling, depending on the grade levels or the grade bands, then that increases, if you will, the English language increases. For a 90-10 model, which is 2 of our language programs, Russian and Spanish begins what we call a 90-10. So 90-10 refers to then, again, the number of minutes or hours in a day of instruction for this. So a kindergartner would start at 90% in, say, Russian, 10% English, and that increases as the grades progress. At the end, it looks about the same, if you will, as they get to middle school and high school. And so we are attempting to meet the needs of not only what, staffing and all the other pieces that we need with curriculum needs, et cetera, but we're making sure that we're following the needs of that community. The next one will actually break down the number of middle schools that offer DLI programs. We have 6 middle schools and 1 K-8 that offer Spanish DLI. And that's, matches the largest number of our multilingual learners in the district as well. We have 2 middle schools that offer Mandarin Chinese DLI, 1 middle school offering Japanese DLI, as you know, and a very successful school, as I understand it. And 1 middle school Russian DLI, and 1 offering Vietnamese DLI. And if we, in our middle school grade demographics look, and I know that everyone can read this necessarily, but as you will see the trends, multilingual learners are the fastest growing group in PPS and in Oregon, nationally as well. We see that one of the largest groups that is growing here is Spanish, and those are the kids that are being served in a lot of our programs. But we also have a great diversity of students. We also have heritage students in our programs, much like our non-Spanish DLI programs that we are serving. So this sort of gives you a picture of where we are, and our programs have consistently maintained that enrollment and have continued to grow and improve as well. This, looking at demographics specifically, and if I can't see it up there, I'm sure that you can't see it either, so let me go to this one as well. We're looking at what, so the district and the state still call students ESL. We don't call them ESL anymore, we call them MLLs. And so our students are learning English as an additional language. This is approximately the makeup of our students. On the left, you see PPS's students in all of our programs and DLI programs, and then on the right, it actually shows us the students at Mount Tabor, and I was wrong about the colors here. Blue is our speakers of the target language or native speakers, and then the other it would be the partner kids, if you will, and I'm throwing partner too much that I was actually going to confuse us.
So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The right side is the ESL students, and the left side is across the district. The number of ESL students
It's across the district, yeah.
that are served in the left side there is historically underserved in the DLI.
And to be more specific, right? The left is speaking specifically to the historically underserved students in the DLI program. Historically underserved sits at 50% compared to not historically underserved. The box on the right, on the lower right, speaks to the ESL population. Specifically, 75% of the students in the DLI programs are not learners of they did not grow up with the language. They're not ESL learners. 25% of the students are ESL learners. At the very top, from the left to the right, it represents the number of students enrolled in each school. And I'm going to say from the left going down, Mount Tabor, 243 students, Kellogg, 225, West Sylvan, 135, Roseway Heights is 124, Beaumont is 115, George is 115, Cesar Chavez is 112, Harrison Park is 82, Ockley Green is 81, Harriet Tubman is 32, and Lane is 28. Okay.
Can I ask a clarification?
Sure.
So that number, those numbers you just read out are in blue, and they are the number of
Students enrolled in the DLI programs in each of the
Each
schools. Okay.
In the middle grades, right?
In middle.
Okay.
In the middle grades.
Yeah. So overall, like the just so you have a sense, there are almost 10,000 middle school students in Portland Public Schools, and about 1,200, almost 1,300 students participate in DLI. The vast majority are participating in Spanish, and we see that overall, like 45% of the students in DLI programs are Latino, and the vast majority of those students are in Spanish DLI across the system. So, and then if you go ahead to the next slide.
The next one, and that's yours.
That's me. Yep. And then, so the piece that we've talked about also is sort of like, how do we provide the context of the number of learning experiences that we see and what are we looking at? So there are a couple of policies, specific policies that guide what it is that we do when we have off-campus learning experiences. Just to give you a sense of what that looks like across the system. So far to date, there have been 112 overnight or wilderness field trip experiences for students. And then again, so far for the current year, there's 11 planned for international trips. And then the two board policies that are guiding our practices are that one is their off-campus learning experience practices policy. And then the administrative directive, sometimes we get a question about why are we in an administrative directive about field trips, and it's really the overall umbrella about this is off-campus learning experiences. So there are a couple other ones that also that have been referenced, and one is around, is this really a foreign travel study program? And same thing, foreign travel study program sends us back into the administrative directive for field trips. They all point to the same place, I guess is what I would say. So I think the challenges that we have seen is, and we've had this conversation a couple of times, is to think about what are the experiences students are having, and what does that look like for learning in off-campus situations. There's specific, the residency program is specific, and also lies and resides within the DLI context, which is, I just wanted to make sure we broadened and understood the number of students that are participating in DLI across the schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah, I think that's good because it helps provide a little bit of context. I think one of the great things about the DLI program is that it's so helpful to, I mean, the way I was presented when it first came in, it was super helpful, especially the native speakers, and they're increasing their success rate.
Yeah, and currently only 25% of students across our district in the DLI programs are
Only 25% what?
Only 25% of students. So the program in its inception was designed with the idea in mind that native speaking students, it could improve and increase their achievement and allow them to have a true sense of biliteracy. And so where the focus was on native speaking students, what we find now is that only 25% of the students that were initially targeted or aimed for this program are actually in the program.
So now it's more people trying to learn a second language.
Yeah, more. It's 75% are out, not within that consideration.
Can I ask a question? What do you understand, or what does PPS understand to be the root of that? Like, where is that coming from in that decrease?
In the decrease of the students enrolling there, I think that how students So there are a number of things about engaging in DLI overall, right? I think is really important to think about. And there are specific entry points, right? And so, as many of you know, but there's an entry point at kindergarten, right? And then there's also entry points as students are, if they're demonstrating a level of proficiency, then they can enter at other grade levels. What we see overall, I think, is that there are a couple of things that we see about the DLI programs right now. I mean, we're seeing declining enrollment across the district is partially impacting what's happening. And then when we look at where what's happening with by the time students get to middle grades, we see quite a bit of attrition, right? And so when we look
In
at
the DLI program?
yes, yeah. So we'd see students, some students continue in the DLI programs and some students choose to leave, right, over time. And part of what we have, I think probably everybody in this room has also experienced is when we are building out breadth of programming, what does that mean for teachers and stability of programming and whatnot? And so they're highly skilled positions, right, and specialized, and it's hard at times to maintain teaching staff across programs, right? Yeah.
So it sounds like you're saying, so even those who started at kindergarten, there's a drop off after 8th grade?
Yep.
So pretty much steady up through it.
Yeah, I mean, the largest, when we look at sort of by grade level, the largest entry, and they're fixed entry points, right? So it's very difficult to move in to a DLI program, and you have to have a stability of population and location. So we see, that impacts students over time. So we do see a decrease in the number of students that continue.
Yeah.
Sometimes they change where they're living or whatever, there's mobility across the district, and it impacts their ability to get to the programs, depending on where that is.
I think you're touching on a bigger topic which would take a lot more to solve. I do want to kind of point out as kind of a again, my kid's in the DLI program, but one of the cool thing, one of the things about Portland Public that I'm really proud of is this DLI program. And one of the reasons is because, as someone who's seen my native language representative in the DLI program, it normalizes it and is part of the culture. And I think it has what started out as something to specifically helping our ESL English language learners and stuff grow and prosper and thrive. Just like any human endeavor, things evolve. And I think it kind of grew. And, anytime you have humans take over, you have teachers who are passionate about these things, they take these things and it grows and it evolves into something that does, obviously you need to make sure that we keep track of our original goals, but it also hopefully encompasses more. And I think that's kind of where, from, my perspective, looking at this, where we're at a headroads is that there's this program, it is growing a certain way. It is presenting some challenges. At the same time, it is also offering more opportunities in other ways. And again, my goal here is to try to problem solve to figure out how we can meet all the above. Maybe a little unrealistic, but at least we can try, right? I was told that you wanted to present as well.
Meaning us, right?
Yeah. People represent the DLI programs.
And we haven't really decided any particular order, but I'm happy to go.
Go for it, Matt.
Do it, Matt.
Well, would it also be helpful, we have some prepared materials. It's not a slick slideshow, but it might be helpful to have this kind of as an anchor chart, I suppose. Would this be helpful for people to have in their hands?
Sure.
Okay.
No infographics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No animations.
Next time.
The visual.
I have one already. Here you go. I do. I have it. Thank you.
Go make sure that.
I have one here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Don't forget. Don't lose it.
I think we've got. Well, I'd like to start by saying that I really appreciate Dr. Flores and Dr. Howard conferring the larger.
You're giving away doctorates here?
I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Yep,
Matt.
yep.
I want to make
Yep.
sure that
No, I think that's sweet. I think that's
Well,
sweet. Doctorate for you.
Anyways,
Doctorate.
as someone who's been involved in the dual language immersion programs for 25 years, I have heard a lot of these numbers before, and I really, really appreciate and deeply respect that origins and the intention and the mission of dual language immersion. And I think there's one piece I might add, and this is my understanding. So if somebody else has, I've been around here for a while, but I also had a brother who was deeply involved in kind of directing and guiding the dual language immersion. But that was, and this maybe relates to what, it's not Dr. Wong, is it? Eddie
That's my
referred
sister.
to in terms of, the part of the programs were also the dual language immersion programs were developed for bringing the invisible to the visible, and in particular, what we call heritage students. So those aren't necessarily native speakers; they didn't necessarily growing up with it, but it's still undo and redo if whatever the history that has occurred in this country, and to recognize and to bring to I liked Eddie's word, normalize what it is, and multilingualism, that includes Japanese, that is Vietnamese, that is Chinese. And I think that those programs, in that regard, my deep experience with students in the Japanese immersion program, that is enormously important. I think one of my former students is sitting over there, can perhaps speak to it better than I can. I think the other thing, I appreciate the context, and I would love to be a part of continuing to support multilingual learners. And I wish that statistic was not 25%, it was better. I wish, quite honestly, that our program was 90-10 and not 50-50, because I know what the research is behind that. And that's the best model. I think the problem that we came here prepared to speak to is in regards to a way that we try to bring a powerful, culminating experience to our students in the Asian dual language immersion programs. It is not something that is limited, certainly, to Asian dual language immersion programs. But that is the research residency. And it is something that in our program, in the Japanese dual language immersion program, something we have been doing since 1996 or 97. As I see those numbers up here, I realize how incredibly important it is, since we tend to have less of those students who are native speakers in our program. But I think there's still argument for anybody who are not living in the context of Japan or China or Taiwan or Vietnam, or context of communities in which they go back to. Most of our students do not go to communities that is the dominant language of the dominant culture. And so this is an opportunity to present or to offer students, and in particular students who don't have connection, who don't have family that travels to, in my case, Japan, or goes home to a Japanese speaking family. It is an absolute golden opportunity, and really in many ways necessary in order to, I think, address some of those issues of attrition that you mentioned, Margaret, about there's often part of the attrition issue that I understand and I have experienced is that they don't see the context. They don't understand how this whole language and culture functions. And it has been my vast experience that taking students to Japan for a period of time that allows them to really soak it in, that it really flips that understanding. And often, and this is pretty consistent over the many years, is students say, I wasn't going on, but after having this experience, I've changed my mind. I understand what this is about. I get it. It puts it in context. And that is a game changer for many. It's a game changer even for those who are continuing on anyways. They speak to what that did in terms of them understanding what it is. I think the real crux of the problem, that's why we're sitting here, is that policy around 5 days. I know it is. But anyways, it's the 5 days versus having something that historically what we've done is always traveled for about 10 school days, which also include weekends. So you've got about 14 days, sometimes 15 days. And I think that, and I don't need to be the only one speaking here, so at some point.
You're doing a great job.
You're doing great.
Reading our mind.
Well, I don't want to I don't want to disregard any of that information that you shared with us. I think what we would like to do is establish here that that is what we'd like to speak to talk about and problem solve. And I really appreciate that invitation, the way you framed it, Eddie. I am interested in everybody's success, everybody feeling like that we are heard and understood. I know that Margaret and I have had many conversations about this, and so I appreciate that and want to be here for that. As for in this pink piece of paper that was handed out by Sakai Sensei, I don't know if it's comprehensive. I do know that it addresses some of the challenges that we face in doing, limiting it to that board policy of 5 school days. I can detail that out. I could speak specifically to our context, or perhaps Leanne and Kojo and Andrew can speak to their context. But our experience is that 2 weeks is really, the idea would be that they're longer absorption of culture and language. But 2 weeks, with given the travel time that it takes to a place like Japan, or significantly a place like Vietnam, you're already eliminating 2 to 3 days for the travel. You have jet lag, which also impacts their capacity to settle in and do the residency part, if you will, of the research residency. And the reason for that term, residency, was middle schooler, well, most of us even, but particularly the middle schooler, is going to need time to settle in, to reside, to figure things out, to get in the rhythm of it. What we find is 2 weeks is, by the you get into that second week and students are suddenly saying, I'm thinking in Japanese, I'm dreaming in Japanese, I'm getting this. Well, a 5-day trip, what we feel like ends up being something rather, it ends up being something rather superficial. It's like you went and saw it, I saw the Tokyo Tower, I saw Kyoto or whatever. It becomes something that they can't really sink into. I think that linguistically, it is it's a number. I mean, 5 versus 10. I just can tell you that anytime that you times that by 2, your absorption, I think it's more than double. I mean, I think it's because you have to have those initial breakthroughs, and then you get into the rhythm of it. Our deep experience, mine certainly is that is absolutely an ideal amount of time, an appropriate it allows for the research projects that these students engage in. It allows them to be students at schools, be members of host families. I don't think that, and is what I heard in previous meetings, that any of the school board members had any issue, or I don't think Margaret either, with the value of this. But I do think that we would like to really hone in on the idea that time is of the essence. And as I said, my student spoke at the board in December. Kilme said, there's a need to go slow. 5 days doesn't allow you to go slow. It really, really hinges or hampers that ability to do that residency part of it and the research part of it, I would argue. We're feeling that this year as we've limited our trip to 6 days. We're giving an extra day for travel. And so maybe I just said too much, but please build on what allow others to go.
Yeah, I think I was listening for also, I understand that there are some technical challenges to how you schedule the trip and how it's organized. Is that so?
Yeah.
Because we're going to talk about some of the challenges that you understand.
Well, specifically for Japan, well, the idea has been put out there that we could use spring break, or that we could use Memorial Day, or we could use winter break, or whatever. One, to kind of pull off that winter break doesn't work it doesn't work for our hosts in Japan. It's New Year's, it's a very important time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, schools are not in session. It's also, in terms of like the setup, the amount of time that we require to set up and take students on this trip, it's not ample. A spring break doesn't work for us in that the Japanese school year ends at that time when we have spring break, and the new academic year begins in April. Real challenge technically. It's also professionally. Just think that somebody, a teacher, consistently is going to give up their spring break to do that. It's not sustainable. So historically, we've always done it in mid-April to the end of April. Last year, we did end up in May again. So that's the job.
I just want to add that it's also cost prohibitive. So, the dates that we had scheduled originally were a certain ticket price. The tickets that we ended up having to purchase to travel over Memorial Day weekend are $500 more per student. We have 75 students traveling. So that's a significant cost increase. In addition to losing what is downtime, it's break time. So
we as parent organizations work with all the students, all the families and the programs from kindergarten until they get to 8th grade and beyond even, to do fundraising to ensure that the trip is affordable for every student. No student is turned away. There are scholarships available. There are full scholarships available. There are partial scholarships available. It's always been a critical part of this research residency for all 3 programs that every student is able to go regardless of ability to pay for it. And so when ticket prices go up, because we go up by $400 because we're traveling over spring break, by $500 because of traveling later, the cost is being passed on to students and families. And that difference in cost is meaning scholarship funds that we're having to, rather than pay scholarships to help students, families are having to pay more. And so we're having to then dip further into scholarships, and our scholarships don't go as far. So we're then having families fundraise more to cover the cost of those scholarships because they are costing more.
So just, if I could ask a clarifying question. When we looked at ticket prices, I did not see an increase that you're describing, but
it's true. When I pulled the numbers for you, there was less of a discrepancy when we actually purchased the tickets they were $500 more. And that is just the reality. Yeah.
So can you, like, in a typical year, what would be the cost per student for one of the trips?
So, I just want to add about,
Sure.
For Harrison Park and Tubman, we're two Title I schools. So even a $200 increase is significant for our numbers. And then when you multiply it by what happened this year, with up to $400 because of during spring break, we have a number of students who are entitled for that scholarship money, and that wipes out a lot of that scholarship money for our students. And one of the things that we take pride in is making sure that every student goes on our program, regardless of economic background. And that is seriously challenged when we're forced into this during spring break. And part of the issue for us is that we couldn't go towards the end of the school year because our sister school could not host us then. They are actually coming here in May. And there was no way we could be going there when they are coming to Portland. So I'm sorry to interrupt on that part. I just want to give more context for why it's really critical for us. And this year, and actually every year, it was something that was new to me because I had never gone during spring break, was we found out that it is the Qingming Festival in Taiwan. I'm very used to taking our students to China. Qingming Festival in China is not a big holiday, but it's a huge holiday in Taiwan. And that limited the amount of days our sister's school could host us, which increased the number of days we had to stay in the hotel, increased the number of days the students have to use our funds for food and transportation. So it's all incremental and exponential when the days are limited with our sister school.
So a typical per student cost for this trip is about how much?
$2,500 is what we've had it at. That's before fundraising. And fundraising varies. We've been able to bring it down to even less than half based on fundraising efforts through the parent organizations, students, for the overall cost per student. And that covers the costs of the teacher, the substitutes, the administrator, because we've made it a sustainable, that's part of our mission to make it sustainable.
Just really quick, speaking to my program, just because like my program, this is my third group of 8th graders going through the MLK, Tubman, Jefferson one. With our numbers right now, I mean, our cost was already before fundraising was $3,400. So as my program continues to grow, hopefully, as more students attend, that will bring the cost down. However, definitely makes it more prohibitive. Last year, I had at least half of my students on scholarship, either full or partial. This year with 8 students, I have 2 on scholarship, but still, we were able to fundraise kind of a lot, but that might not be every year. It puts a lot of pressure on students' families.
Can I add that a little bit? For our program, we're looking for, to get like a cheaper ticket for, for the trip. Because of the time frame, so actually the ticket, the travel agent said if I just do a week earlier, it's like $400 cheaper per ticket. And also I have, family, they're concerned about, for a short amount of time, for this short amount of time and for the kids to go all the way to Vietnam. Because sometimes, the travel day, it take up to 36 hours. And, for that time, it's really too much on the student. So some of the parents have great concern, and they actually, I have one family decided to pull their kids and not going this year. So that's the concern.
Because of the shorter time they would be there.
Yeah,
and
because
all
of
that
that,
long.
yeah. And then with the long travel, with also like the expensive cost that they have to pay.
Family didn't see it was worthwhile.
Yeah.
I think a
didn't
lot
think
of
their children
families will feel that way.
So you said for the family to pay. Say more about how these trips are funded and for whom, and then what's the criteria for specialized funding?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So the Vietnamese Immersion Program has a nonprofit parent group that was formed to help those families raise monies to build a successful program that we've seen Japanese and American programs create. My son is in the very first immersion class, started 10 years ago. Vietnamese community has been around Portland for 49 years, since my parents first came to this country. And we've never had anything like this. This is the second Vietnamese immersion program in the country, so it's very special in that regard. At the same time, you know, our community is probably more challenged socioeconomically as a result. So there's a pretty large ranging effort to fundraise among parents, community, GoFundMe efforts, school auctions that we've conducted, flower sales. It's a very comprehensive effort from multiple grade levels for multiple students to raise funds from the community, sponsorships from outside as well. A very broad effort, and I think we're in a pretty good position right now. Might need some help. The district could offer for some. I think there was a mention at the board meeting that I last attended that there's a district equity fund that's potentially available for travel abroad research residencies. I don't know what the status of that is, but just in terms of equity, I'd also just throw out there, Japanese program, the Mandarin program have been around for decades and have had very successful trips for decades, for 2 weeks. Vietnamese immersion program comes along. We have our first cohort that's slated to go. It's amazing what this group has done. We've seen it. They've offered so much support in terms of helping us build a program, giving us some pointers, some best practices. We show up at the table and it looks like our opportunity is half as much from the get-go. And it feels a little unfair from my perspective in the Vietnamese immersion program.
I want to add, there's another cost that we haven't really talked about, and that's the admin cost. So
Yes.
the first question is, are any of these other trips that you talked about, are they required to bring admin on their trips?
100%.
All of them
It's
have.
it's district policy.
Okay. Because the cost of bringing in an admin along with us is not just the cost of their ticket, which these parent organizations with fundraising from the families and the students pay wholly for their ticket. They pay for their hotel, they pay for all their food, but we also are obligated to pay the cost of that sub fee. Last year,
Exorbitant.
Last year, we were told it was going to be around $4,000 for the sub fee for 2 weeks for the admin. We got a bill for almost $8,000, and our treasurer contacted the person who sent the bill multiple times, asking if we could meet, if we could talk about it, if we could have an understanding of what the cost was coming from, because it was almost double what we expected. Couldn't get any reply, and it was really frustrating. But at a cost of almost $8,000 just for the sub fee.
That's 3-4 scholarships.
Except for full scholarships for students. So we could be paying student scholarships.
Yeah, I'm going to speak directly
really hard.
to, I understand the struggle and the piece that is being described. And I think there are a couple things about the policy that are important to surface. And one is that there's, one of the foundational pieces is that travel cannot be, supervision can't be the cost of supervision can't be a consideration for not providing supervision. right? So that's part of what the policy is as we go through. The piece around when we travel, I've traveled internationally with groups of students and as an administrator, and I think that the piece of working with students traveling abroad, there are a number of things that surface that administrators have a slightly different lens on. It's the job of administrators to support. It's different. They look at it differently than teachers do, for sure. And part of what we do, especially with international trips, is that we have administrators travel. So the piece of there's a variety of things like that when things go well and everything is functioning, like, yeah, I think people say, well, why is this necessary? And then when things don't go as well, I think it's administrators it's their critical parts to the process. I guess the other part that I would say is that in thinking through the ratios of what it is to supervise, and every field trip and every off-campus experience has a ratio of adults to students, and the role that adults play with that. So, I mean, some of the number of chaperones that are traveling, the ratios are much lower than we would, as I'm looking at the field trips, the number of adults that are traveling, their ratios are much lower than is required. So, I mean, I think there's this trade-off of what does that look like? But that is part and parcel of what it means to travel internationally. I think the other part for PPS is it's complicated. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen traveling abroad, and we are responsible. So we work as an organization, as we are in those times in loco parentis, really, right? And so there's a responsibility for us to provide those resources as we go.
Are there any, I guess maybe my ask for problem solving is there any cheaper alternatives for admin? Like, for example, can any admin go? Like, if you wanted to go, or like, could it be the VP?
Need an in-building sub.
Or even admin that, it sounds like there's also trouble, like if the admin could also help out supervising kids, that would also be a big bonus too, and maybe even.
So I think there are a couple of things I would say. One is, depending on the size of the trips, right? So the Japanese trip has over 70 students going to 2 different cities, right? At various times. It's a complicated trip. And we can talk about, I think ultimately, and I've heard the staff say this very explicitly, you want people that know the kids, right? So I think that's part and parcel of what we're looking at. And conversely, right, one of the things that we have stated is we want to make sure that we have the school site is also sufficiently staffed to support the students that are not on the trip, right? So we have to balance these two, and as we go through, and I think that's the criteria that has been laid out, is to be really clear about how we are making sure that we're supporting not only the students that are on the trip, but the students that are at the school site.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Is the policy having the principal of the school attend the exchange? Is that a newer policy? Because when I chaperoned in 2018, it was not the principal of the school. It was a district person.
It is an administrator who needs to go.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it doesn't have to be the principal of the school where you
It has to be a licensed administrator,
Okay.
right? And
So
I think
would that be less expensive to not be paying for a
Sub
sub fee for your principal?
It's the sub fee that we feel is significant here.
Yeah.
Not that
Like
we're willing to
understand
bear
why-
the cost of the chaperone of the administrator coming. It's that sub fee that is really we're feeling challenged by that.
Yeah, I think, are there resources and people that can go that are administratively licensed? That is, we can look at some creative solutions there. Again, what I would say is the question is, are there I mean, ultimately, you want people that are familiar with the students. And that is why we often, the vast majority of the times, as you're describing, we have staff from the school site present. So I think that there are opportunities, but then again, what that means is that we have to, whatever that person's workflow is, means that we're going to have to absorb, right? And if it's a retired administrator, they're going to have to be a PPS employee, right, in order for that to happen. So it's not that there isn't there's some decision points that we can make, but again, what it means is that the person's workflow is going to shift, right? And there's whether or not there's what that cost looks like may not be. I mean, it may not be a per dollar cost in that realm, borne by the borne by the parent group.
How's the sub fee determined? I think
It's a daily rate, so it's like a substitute teacher. You have a substitute administrator rate. Yes.
I just want to point out that in 2019, before COVID, I applied for and was granted an administrator override for our program. This was through risk management, and as I laid out the reasons, and they felt it was my reasons were adequate. I don't know where that change has come and why there's such an emphasis on having an administrator. And so, excuse me for thinking out loud here, but it's especially going to places like Japan and China, where an administrator who has never been to an Asian country will be quite often out of their element. And historically, I've led our program since 2008. The administrator would often come back to me to resolve issues because of the cultural and language barriers that existed. And that's something, unless the administrator is fluent and has that background, they're not going to be quite as effective as an administrator in that position.
So, and I guess my question is, my understanding is there are a number of chaperones that travel as well?
Yes.
And so the criteria is that all the chaperones are?
Nope.
Okay. So I think that part of what we provided the larger context about how we do trips, right? You're very focused on the residency trip, right? And we have to say, what are the decision criteria that we're going to apply, not only to this experience, but other experiences, right? And so I think that the part of what is, what we've have seen and have happened in a variety of trips is it's helpful. I mean, we've had things not always go smoothly on international trips. And that's part of the reason why we engage with administrators on the trips. But I think that as we're trying to think through what does that look like, the policies is clear. There are spaces where I've seen the written requests for exceptions. And I think that, in the context that where we are, I think it's, we've been applying this consistently. Coming out of COVID is different than going in. I will say that traveling is different coming out of COVID than it was for sure.
Can I ask for just clarification real quick? Margaret, you said that this was a policy that was in place, that the administrator must go on the trip. I've just spent a little bit of time researching this, and I know there's a policy, there's an administrative directive as well, which are two different things, right? And this administrative directive on field trips says at least 2 adults, including 1 administrator, must accompany students on an international field trip. But then it says the district may consider a waiver to this procedure. So I guess I don't know how to interpret that, I guess, with what you're saying, which is that it's required, but there's also, as kind of Kojo mentioned, there's also this other area that
So
is considered.
The administrative directive allows for there to be some considerations, right? So, and I think that as we go through and look at how we are applying the administrative directive and considering coming out of COVID, in particular, we felt very strongly that we needed to have administrators traveling with students internationally. This is a large group of young people, and we have a responsibility as a district to those students while they're abroad. And it was complicated enough coming out of COVID that we said we were going to do this and apply it regularly and consistently, right, across. In the whole scheme of things, right, like I think the question of, part of the challenge with one of the trips was that it was actually quite a long trip, and that it was a long number of days, and that's what part of the concept, the cost is, right, is so the length of the trip impacts what the sub fees are across the board. So that's part of what happened with last year's trip. It was significantly longer.
It was standard length that we've been doing for a
So
It is frustrating though that there's this language in these policies that allows for exception or allows for waivers. But why can't we have a discussion about changing that for research residency? Because I don't see, I'm sorry to say this, but I don't really see the value of an administrator on a trip to Japan when they don't speak the language. Like what is that person actually supplying?
Can I just interrupt really quick?
Yeah.
This is actually a great segue, thank you.
Yeah.
It's actually something I was going to speak to.
Yep.
For the sake of time,
Yeah.
I kind of want to get to the crux of this, crux of this. The issue here also, I want to also tackle is that 5-day thing. So one of the things I do know, I want to kind of,
George, I'm
Yeah.
going to excuse myself from this place and sit in the back. My back is spasming.
yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, take care. Yeah, if you don't have,
I'll be
Back
right
problems
over
are-
here. I just
yeah.
don't think you all should watch me grimace.
These residency programs are unique because these kids go to school in the foreign countries. It is an academic experience. It's not a field trip or anything like that. So it's something special. At the same time, the district also has challenges in that we don't want to have, I'm not talking about these programs. We're talking about every program. We don't want abuses in the system, right? The 5 days was implemented to protect people from abusing the system so that we don't have issues of kids being left behind, issues of people abusing the system going for longer than they have. From what I've heard, the DLI programs that we're talking about here have dealt with that issue already and have had a lot of accommodations and tackled that. So one of the questions I have to kind of get at the heart of the issue, is there a path forward? And maybe it's a question of like what staff may need from the board to help out in terms of redefining. This is just one question, right? This is one. I'm trying to put on my problem-solving hat. Redefining residency trips as under the exceptional category. Would that require something like, for example, a list of requirements that have to be met in order to apply to become a exceptional category, not a field trip, right? To be exceptional. This is kind of like part of the reasons why I was asking for what are the needs of each individual program, right? So like, for example, what we don't want is anybody to go out and just say we're exceptional because we're going this far and therefore, abusing the system, right? Because the DLI programs have done a lot of homework to make sure that this is a real academic experience, right? I'm gonna interrupt for just one quick second. Absolutely, interrupt.
So I think that there's this sense that when people are off campus that it's not real learning experience. So I want to dispel that. I don't think that is the case.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I believe that the research residency are rich learning experiences. I believe that the experiences that other people are doing off campus are also rich learning experiences. So I think that if we were to say that you're actually getting to the point that is really critical, which is how is this different than other experiences, right? Because I think that's the argument, is that this is dramatically different than other experiences. And I think that's the challenge, right? Is how is that? And I'll come back to when we have other DLI programs,
Right.
and the largest populations are in DLI programs that speak Spanish in particular. And we say, how is this a different experience than, is that not like, how is that different? That's the part that we have to speak to, or our Russian immersion students, right? To say that these are what is the criteria for the residency, right? And then when we talk about sort of and the parent organizations are amazing. I think that it's remarkable. I think that we have to say, are we seeing those same experiences for all? This is not
across all programs across the district to ensure that all of our DLI students, regardless of the language of the program, can experience the same.
We've spoken with the board over a number of years, and I think that Matt and Kojo probably have a few more dates in their brains about when this has happened. But I know that there have been a couple times over the years that our parent programs and the teachers, I believe as well, have offered to support a district-wide capstone project for all 8th grade students. We've offered to support the development of something for all 8th grade students. I know that Mount Tabor Middle School is doing their first ever Oregon research residency for all non-DLI students this year, which is amazing.
They leave soon.
Modeled on the JR.
For 5 days.
They're going to Pendleton.
They're going to Pendleton. They don't have to fly to get there.
I just, it's not really relevant that how far you're traveling, like that doesn't.
Well,
I also think
it sort of is, isn't it? I mean, if
That's what I'm confused by.
If you can get there in 2 hours, it's different than if it takes 25 hours to get there.
Also, there's a huge difference in terms of population. I mean, like, I want to also be careful that we're not saying like, oh, because we can't provide for all, we shouldn't provide for some. Because I think that's a very dangerous path to go down, because that's part of that zero-sum idea, mentality. And I want to just make sure that we clarify, like, yeah, we would like this for everyone, but the problem with a lot of the Asian languages is that there just isn't that access in this country. And having someone who grew up with my native language was Mandarin, but it was shunned out of me from an early age, and now the only connection I have is through this DLI program. Sorry, I'm admitting my bias right now, which I haven't hidden really. Hopefully not. But the issue is that I was going to say, we have to just be careful. Like, yeah, we would love this for everyone. I think that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Of
course we would.
But we got to be careful not to say, at one time I do understand the issue. Like, yeah, the difficulty, and this is maybe part of the ask. Like, maybe this is something the board needs to solve. What do we say to the other groups, that don't have these programs or don't have the means to provide these programs? I think that's a real issue. At the same time, we can't say no to a group that has it because we can't provide it. I think that's just a very dangerous path to go down. And I think that, although the reasons are valid, we have to also question whether that's the right way to do things, right?
We can't support growth in other areas if we dismantle what is currently working.
Right.
And successful.
And our boards have been great about supporting each other. Like when Jinren was first starting, Shuren worked together with Jinren, representing King, Harriet Tubman, and Jefferson Cluster. Our program worked closely with the Jinren program, who I'm afraid their chair is traveling and not able to be here today. But we work closely with them to share like what's worked for us. They have a very different population, so they had to find a path. But we worked with them to say, this is what's worked for us, and this is how we run, and this is how our organization is put together. And I think that that all 3 of our programs have worked closely with the Vietnamese parent organization to support them in their growth as well. And I think that I can safely speak for all of our parent organizations to say we would be very happy to support any Spanish-speaking program organization, parent organization, if they wanted to put together a parent organization, or if they wanted to grow a parent organization to work towards something like this. We're open. You know, our boards work really closely together, and that's been fantastic. But we're obviously not close to only Asian languages. Because all of our students do speak Asian languages, and as Director Wong pointed out, you can't get those languages in any kind of density in the U.S. And with Mandarin, you're not going to find a dense cluster of Mandarin. You're going to find a dense cluster of Cantonese. That's very different. You're not going to find a dense cluster of Japanese. You're not going to find a dense cluster of Vietnamese in a large enough area that students have to utilize their learned language skills to get around. And that's why they have to go to those countries.
So can you help me understand, what is the actual school year? So I'm hearing that that the school year, I hear December is a break and I hear spring break is a break. So what's the actual school year? Starts in May?
For which
Different
for which country?
Let's start in Japan and then we'll work our way around.
Yeah.
How about?
So next week would be the end of the school year, the academic year.
Okay.
And April 1, depending if that falls on a beginning of the week or whatever, is the start of the school year.
And it ends in?
It ends in March. I know it feels a little.
Okay.
It goes all year.
Okay. But there's a break in December, is what you're saying.
Typically it's a week. I believe but it's a little longer than that because there's New Year's is the most significant holiday, and so it goes.
And then there's also Golden Week, which is you can't travel during Golden Week.
And that's towards the end of April.
Beginning of May.
May 5th.
Okay. What for Vietnam?
For Vietnam, I would say the school year normally start in September and then end in, like at the end of May. But during the Lunar New Year, there's significant, like, normally to me, like around February, they probably have like 2 weeks off, not having school. And then, holidays, some of the holiday can, like 3 or 5 days.
Yes. In Taiwan?
So it's similar to ours, except, so September they start, but they have, there's Chinese New Year when they have their big break, and that varies slightly from year to year. And they're also the exams that we have to dance around, which are very high stakes because I think similar to Japan, in China, in Taiwan, and in China, they have to take exams to get into preferred high schools. It's not guaranteed.
So Taiwan, or are you saying China's similar, is that it's September through?
Yeah.
Is it September through August then, or is it?
Yes.
September to like June.
June.
Yeah.
And I just want to add something, and Kojok, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding from Taiwanese friends about these exams is these students they go to school all day and then they have intense tutors at night leading up to these exams. So even if we wanted to have a homestay ahead of those, the kids are not going to be available. The families are not going to commit their kids to be able to participate because their students need to score well enough to get into the high school of their choice. And it's not like high school here. It's very different.
That was a big issue with us going during the time because both of our schools are going around spring break, and it was pretty hard nailing down a time. We had a couple of discussions with their sister school because for a lot of their 7th and 8th graders, they were getting ready for those finals, like after, along with the holiday as well. So kind of speaking to what Coach Joyce mentioned earlier, affected homestays, but then also even if we get homestays, I feel like some of our pen pals who are in 8th grade or getting ready for those quizzes might not, some of our students might not even get that full homestay experience, unfortunately, because they're so intensely studying.
So can you help me understand then? I heard two different things. So I heard that spring break was a challenge because of that, but school continues after this. And that I'm like, what?
Talk about our spring break.
Oh yeah, our spring break, sorry.
Right, okay.
Us leaving during that time.
But then they're still in school until June.
Yeah.
And what's that window of testing then? Do you have a sense of?
That also, as far as I understand, it's also varies from year to year because of the
New Year's. Okay.
calendar.
So for the sake of time, tell me your thoughts about this. I have some homework for everyone. I know that we're all over work, so this is homework is a bad word. I think this is going to probably take another meeting to really hash out problem solving. I don't think this was, I think this was a good use of time because I think we both sides kind of laid out the challenges. One of the things that I want to point out that worried me a bit, and this is kind of going to the DLI programs, is the fact that when this year having to do it over spring break, there was this I think Patty and I both agree it's not fair for teachers to have to give up their spring break year after year. And one of the things that kind of popped in my mind, and I'm sure to a lot of other people, is that we're potentially talking about the long-term sustainability of the program. And to have it end like this would be tragic. And that kind of points out to another, I think what the homework assignment I was going to ask of you. I would like, if it was possible, to figure out, for example, like right now we have these DLI program, these residence teach programs that are dependent on individual teachers, right? And what if one of you got COVID? That means these kids can no longer go, or something like that. Or maybe, oh no, what if you decide to retire, which hopefully never happens, but someday it will, right? Right. And so, like how, one question is like, so maybe the homework is problem solving, like how can we build long-term sustainability in this program? And there's a reason I'm asking for this, and I'll point out in a sec. And again, give me your thoughts. Maybe I'm completely crazy because of lack of sleep, because of the time change. How can we build long-term sustainability so it's not dependent on one teacher? Maybe it's they develop curriculum that can be transferred from one teacher to another. Or maybe it's like two sister schools that they always join together for these other trips. I'm just brainstorming. And every alternate year, one of the teachers leads it, right? This could also include ask for the district. So maybe we need to have more than one teacher in the DLI program or something like that. So that's my ask for you. That the other question, so the other homework is kind of for staff, is what do you need in terms of problem solving? And for example, what are the pathways that you could result in a doable solution? Like, for example, do you need the board to give direction about the AD? That's one thing. Or maybe a change in policy. That's another thing to ask the board. What can the board do to help? Or maybe like if these programs can, I would like to figure out a solution that doesn't require teachers to give up their spring break or do it over these dates that, or maybe a solution, maybe we do need to occasionally do over spring. Maybe the solution is we need to do it because what's best for the kids. And sometimes that occurs during, based on their calendar, our calendar overlaps with different types of holidays. Who knows? I'm just throwing this out there. But what do we need in terms of making this work for these residency trips? Is that kind of, is that kind of clear, or do I need to
You want us all to toss out our dreams, or best,
and
best
I think
ideas, or
right. And I think to join the two, the part of the reason I'm asking for a long-term stability is because what if the best that we could come up with as a district is like a partial solution, and that would require that the stability program has a backup, for example. Again, it is late. I didn't have I skipped lunch, so I am running on low blood sugar here trying to explain. Do you think that is something feasible for everyone?
I don't want to be disagreeable, but I'm going to say that I feel like, particularly speaking for the JDLI and this paper in front of me, we've already done that. Like, we've been giving solutions and we've been giving answers to questions. And I keep hearing from the district that you see the value and you want to find a solution. So I guess I would ask, what is your solution?
I think
What is the solution for sustainability for these programs?
Before answering that question, I think we need to be clear on the challenges at the school site and within our instructional program as far as what happens during this trip back at the school. And Margaret, could you share a couple of those challenges? Because I think what I hear Director Wong saying is, and I, align with trying to find a resolve, but you can only find a resolve if we understand the challenges from both parties. And so as long as we can solve for both things, right?
Absolutely.
On both sides. But what are some of those challenges that happen at the school site once the trip is in play? Margaret,
Yeah.
to answer that.
Yes, I can.
for me, please?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple things to think through. And that is that, the depending on the size of the student population traveling relative to the size of the grade level, there's different impacts, right? And so at some sites, it's a small group of students within the 8th grade that are traveling, and some sites, it's almost half the 8th grade that are traveling, right? And so I think that the question of, we worked for quite a period of time last year, especially with the team from Mount Tabor, of saying, like, here's how we're aligning and what does this look like? And there's impacts at the school site of how do you maintain and sustain academic momentum in the process. What we're seeing is that there are a couple of things that are going to be surfacing. So there's we have Mount Tabor has done, now they have a research residency for a group of students that is 5 days. And now we're going to have another residency, and they're not traveling at the same time, right? So we're going to see there's benefits and drawbacks as we go through and we look at it, and we have to address that. I think the other piece is, I see some questions from the DLI parents and coordinators to the board, and I'm happy to go back through and respond to these questions that are at the back we talked about the administrator. Do other field trips require administrator presence? Yes. It's not unique to the DLI residencies. There's fundraising that is done almost for every time people travel. So that is, and substitutes are covered as part of that cost. That's not unique to the DLI residencies. So I think that, when we go through and we say, how do we build out and sustain the momentum and the experience for the students, what is hard and what has been challenging, and as I'm thinking through all of the school year pieces that we have, as well as the school year pieces that we're navigating in other countries, this is also in the midst of it's in the midst of OSAS testing. So all the things around these weeks, we have to build out calendars, right? And so it's about coordinating calendars and making sure that we're aligning is the big thing. And then it's a question of, how are we navigating when students are off, and students and staff are away for this period of time. And I think that the piece of, we've talked about this a few times, about what does that mean for the students that are learning Vietnamese when the Vietnamese, at the other grade levels, or Mandarin at the other grade levels, and also Japanese. So that's some of this, it's the layers of what happens with the students that are, and then what's happening with the rest of the school. I think ultimately, one of the questions I have is, and thinking about solutions and thinking through the timing, the reason I'm asking about where is the school year, right? So I'm thinking about, like, what does that mean for, like, November? Because there's some opportunities in November that are different than other months from PPS's standpoint and from our calendar. So I'm just trying to figure out how do we align our calendar and the host school calendars and what are some possibilities there, so.
And so would it be like a joint planning?
Yeah.
Like in advance, right?
Yep,
Could
yep.
we get things on a calendar and do some joint planning and thinking around it together so that we could solve for all of it? And then I'm gonna stop talking and let you continue.
Yeah, that's good clarity, yeah.
Thanks. I appreciate the effort to problem solve, and I trust the staff and the teachers with all of the calendaring. I'm not qualified to do so. I just wanted to speak to, in the spirit of problem solving, my perspective is that this has somewhat been solved already. To Maya's point,
Thank you.
5 years ago, this was brought up, and there is documentation on your district's website that says right here, showed you, this is staff analysis report to the board. There's direction to delete the 5-day limit on trips signed by the superintendent with a revised board policy and a directive to update the corresponding administrative directive. So I guess I'm confused.
When is this made?
This was March of 2019.
So part of what happened during that meeting, and I think some people were there, potentially that are in the room here, but part of what happened was that there was a 5-day limit in the policy itself. And the directive was to put it into the administrative directive. That was what came from that meeting that ended up, so that it came out of the policy, but it did get added to the administrative.
Administrative directive hasn't been updated since, it says here at the bottom of it.
It stayed in the, it's in at the
Hasn't been updated
2016.
since 2016.
So it stayed in the administrative directive.
That's not what this says. It says right there, deletes the 5-day limit on
In the
trips.
policy. It was going to go into the policy.
Yeah, when the governance issues about good policies that you don't want policies to micromanage. So that I think keeping the administrative directive, but like you said before, the reason it's the advantage of the administrative directive is it allows some flexibility, right? So I guess
Well,
I know.
How can you add it to the administrative directive if it was already there?
So the policy, it was going to go into the policy and they took it out of the policy and left it in the administrative directive. I misspoke.
Could I say it a different way? A policy by design is only supposed to address what? Content, what? And then the administrative directive says how to execute on the what. And apparently it sounds like they found a flaw where the policy was talking about what and how, and they wanted to take out the how and put it into an administrative directive to make it distinct. Is that what?
The proposal, it was, that's a great description, Dr. Proctor, but the proposal and the policy actually was to take it from the administrative directive and put it into the policy. They were going to say that there was not going to be the policy was going to be explicit, and the decision at the time was to leave it in the administrative directive.
So, unfortunately, I'm not going to speak for the board members, but I think there's a will to get to a solution. Would it, let's say, is it, because I think the issue of, how the students who are not going, I think has been addressed. Is that?
In some degree,
It's been addressed multiple
ways.
times, in multiple ways. Every
There-
question asked has been answered.
So
Could you-
I'm gonna, I want to just frame it. So we asked explicit questions last year. As we were going through, we said, these are the questions that need to be answered explicitly. Those questions were answered. That is true. And I think that part of what is also true is that we have to look at, there are costs that are not being borne by the parent groups nor the families that are traveling, that are internal to the building. So that's where.
Share with us, can you share with us the nature of those costs?
Sure.
The first heard such a thing.
Well, but it's how the school runs and what does that look like? So it's like there are parts of, it's built into the pieces, but I'm happy to do that. So I think that ultimately when we're looking through, it is, there's varying levels of degree of specificity in the questions that were answered and in the pieces. But the goal is to maintain academic momentum in all spaces at the same time, right? Like that's the goal. And so I'm happy to surface what that looks like. The series of questions that we laid out last year were answered for sure. And that's the same sort of response, that's similar responses that we got this year. So I think that as we go through, we're going to look at like, what are the pieces? What is that, how do we lay this out? What is that? How are we building this? And part of what happens in a school is that you're going to have to, what isn't seen and there is how is the work that happens to support the school as a whole and also the students that are there, right? So there is, it's not as visible and it's, like I won't be able to say it's a line item, but this is the work of when we're looking at a school community, what does that look like? It's complicated in different settings. It's different at Roseway Heights where you have 2 DLI programs and a neighborhood program, right? It looks different than it does at Mount Tabor where it's half of the student population versus at Tubman when it's a smaller student population. So we can look at the various contexts.
So how do we reach a solution? I guess I'm worried because this meeting is already over, where do we see this path forward to a solution if, as I said in the last time I saw you, I'm not an administrator, I'm not a teacher, I'm just a parent that volunteers a lot of time for this program. And I can just say that if the research residency isn't sustainable and doesn't exist, you're going to lose enrollment at Tabor, which is already under enrolled. It's already because of SEGC, another volunteer job that I hated, it's under enrolled. And half of the school is now JDLI, and it is a academically rigorous program. It's really, really challenging for the students and for parents. And if we can't come up with a solution where there is this thing that I told you in our meeting that we all as parents signed on to when our kids entered kindergarten. Some of us, our kids entered preschool in the JDLI. And, my daughter who spoke at the board meeting, she said she's been preparing for this moment since before she entered Richmond. So I just want to understand how we're going to reach a solution, because if it's really just about the numbers, we're going to lose the numbers at Tabor.
So I need to call an end to the meeting. So before we do that, could you or someone or whatever present a list of what you would like to see, assuming that we're going to make, assuming these trips are going to be continuing, right? So let's say, like, for example, they need more than 5 days. Let's say, okay, what do you need in order for these trips to need more than 5 days?
Okay.
And then and then whether that includes direction from the board or you need further discussion, all the above, or maybe even better, a list of options, right? And I guess on the other, for your side, I think this is going to have to, trying to think on my feet here. I think we'll wait for that, get that. I don't know if there's a timeline that would work for you. I assume like next year's planning is probably going to be needs to happen starting pretty soon, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so.
Really hoping we can
Especially with all
find a
of the
resolution before the
challenges.
end of the school year.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
By the end of the school year.
I would be okay if it's okay with everyone here, to reserve time during the next Student Success Committee, which is next month.
That is challenging, right, Kojo, for you, because that's when you return?
We return on the 8th.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Unless you want me to come straight from the airport.
Well, we won't expect
Shower.
Fall asleep on the desk.
Right. Yeah, you need at least a week to recover. So I'll think of something.
All right.
Thank you.
Figure that out. And then,
I guess there are two things that I would hope or ask in return, right? Like one is
Yeah, please.
Is there flexibility around a trip in the fall as opposed to the spring? I think calendars are easier in the fall than they are in the spring. And I think that there are pieces of thinking about, I hear the piece around sustainability, and you know, I need to think a little bit about that. But probably the one question I have is there a possibility of thinking about a trip in the fall as opposed to?
I hate to be difficult, I can answer that, and I heard you call an end of the meeting, so I apologize. In fact, I had a request for admin, which was to bear in mind that it's not simply for the sake of going, and it's not simply for the sake of going for 10 days. I know you have not questioned the value. It's a capstone project. I almost wanted to give myself some more homework, which is to say, what is a research residency? Like, it checks these boxes in order to meet that definition. And the capstone project is part of that. And so between beginning of 8th grade and the end of 8th grade there's a tremendous period of growth linguistically and cognitively, which I don't have to tell you. But so therefore, unfortunately, doing a research residency in the fall does not provide time for that linguistic growth. It will be before their STAM tests. That cognitive growth can't happen. And if we went in, say, November, we would be beginning our capstone projects on the first day of school. In order to be able to meet that time. So actually my request, which is a little bit preempted now, was to bear in mind that students will need adequate time in order to create quality. This is not a product I'm talking about. In order to like fully meet that academic rigor and be fairly prepared for those requirements, it needs to happen when we've done it historically. And we can be flexible around certain areas, but that growth time is required. And then time afterwards, when they return, we're gonna have 6 days until, I think 9 days until summer break, and 6 days until they'll be presenting, which is as far back as we could push it, which is an unfair amount of time. So we'll do as much of that, you know, in order to be flexible, we're gonna do as much of that work before they go. Much of the work which has historically been done afterwards, including like building up a presentation, we'll do ahead of time. And that's something that students can do, and we've shown that we can do it. It's not ideal though. And that in order to give students the maximum chance of success, to be confident and proud of the project that they've created after you know, meeting the rigorous requirements of an international intercultural exchange, that they be given the maximum opportunity to create the best linguistic and what is that word? Interdisciplinary capstone project. And that's the point of it. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I do have to close this meeting because I think sorry for going over time. If it's possible, I would still like that question answered. Maybe it could be explored, maybe not necessarily for next year, but like in the long term. An idea for something like maybe it's a 7th and 8th grade development period. I don't know, but it would be nice to have that explore, just because, and also understand it may not be the solution, but at the same time, it would be. I think it's fair to kind of explore that.
I needed a little clarification on this. Is not for everybody. On our homework.
Yeah.
Clarification.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Seconded?
Okay. Seconded. Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Appreciated your framing, especially around so many aspects for like, particularly making sure that was really helpful. Yeah. It's close.
And southeast for North Dixon Street.
You know what?
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.